tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by my side.
Chapter 3 Harry He supposed he had better start calling himself Death now, considering the boy currently shuddering on the ground a few yards away was having the time of his life. Well, the time of his death, really. He could tell the moment he emerged into this reality that there had not been a death already present. In fact, he seemed to have automatically absorbed the position into himself, and could already feel the departing souls passing through him in a river parallel to the ones he could still feel from his original world. Excellent. Death turned back to Dumbledore, and didn't that just make him want to crow with laughter, and found him still staring at the pin he used to keep his invisibility cloak closed over his shoulders with horrified comprehension. Oh well, Dumbledore had always been a useless, manipulative bastard as far as he was concerned. It just looked like he was a bit slow in this dimension as well. Ignoring the old man, he paused and cackled aloud at the mere idea that this man was old in any meaningful way. He turned to face the body of his alternate self, grin seemingly fixed on his face at the vast amusement he was getting out of this whole situation. The whole room seemed horrified, and he hadn't even done anything yet. Laughing again, just because he could and because it had been so very long since he'd had anything to laugh at, he took a step towards his other self, pleased when he didn't recoil in fear like those nearest him were doing. He always knew he was a brave one. "Why have you summoned me here?" he asked the boy curiously, finding himself absently fascinated at the way the room seemed to be reacting to his voice. Oh, right. He hadn't talked to a mortal in so long that he'd forgotten what he sounded like. Oops. Other Harry swallowed nervously, still on one knee from where he'd collapsed after Death emerged for some reason. Maybe they were showing him deference? He couldn't fathom why they'd all fallen to their knees. Otherwise, inwardly he preened, pleased that they held him in such high esteem already. He was awesome and he knew it, but it was nice to have others acknowledge his amazingness as well. Dumbledore wanted to summon a hero, Other Harry explained concisely, and rather evenly considering the way his face had paled and the way he was swaying slightly. Was he ill? Death was concerned for about half a millisecond before he got over it. From another dimension. To kill the Dark Lord. They wanted him to kill someone? Well, he was very good at that. But, a hero? That couldn't be right. He hadn't been a hero in, well, about 4 Earths worth of time. Something of his thoughts must have reflected on his face, because Other Harry's lips thinned in agreement. Well, they were almost like the same person. It made sense that they'd think alike. Only, he was an immortal personification of death and the little Harry was a teenage human wizard, but regardless. But, he couldn't just go around letting these people think they owned him or something. He'd have to get some sort of agreement out of the lot of them. Maybe make them promise him their firstborn son or something. He discarded the thought as soon as it formed. What use would he have for a bunch of infants? I may not be a hero, little wizard, but I am very, very good at killing things, Death admitted with a renewed grin. This universe was already so very much more exciting than the last one. He kicked one leg out and lounged back in the huge black throne-like chair that formed itself out of the shadows in the room behind him. Slightly bewildered at the sharp intakes of breath from all around the room at the action. It was just a chair. Why were they getting so worked up over a chair? Shrugging to himself, he kicked one leg over the arm of the chair and relaxed there, observing the mortals in the room through half-lidded eyes, smile turning lazy and content as he waited for them to gather themselves. Dumbledore seemed to finally catch up to the situation at hand, standing and straightening his obscenely yellow robes. Death took a moment to stare at the robes, decided he didn't like the color of them, and promptly turned them a sedate royal blue instead. There, that was much better. Ignoring the further intakes of breath at this honestly, these people were so easily surprised he stared at Dumbledore and waited for him to speak. He was patient, after all. He could wait. Welcome to this reality, my boy, Dumbledore beamed, spreading his hands and twinkling madly. Death frowned at him, displeased at being called his anything, and for some reason the entire room seemed to flinch and shrink back at the expression on his face. Dumbledore paled slightly, but kept on with a noticeable dim in his twinkling eyes. As young Harry has just informed you, the ritual used to summon you here called for someone who had already vanquished Lord Voldemort. Would I be correct in assuming that this is accurate? Death blinked mildly at the man. Lord who? Oh, Voldemort? Hadn't that been that Dark Lord that had kept trying to kill him when he was a mortal? Honestly, after the first 1,000 years or so he'd completely forgotten about the man. He was just a mortal, and death had been in a bit of an anti-mortal phase for a few millennia there. Plus, the man's name was just insulting. Flight of Death? Oh, and he made those Horcruxes too. That irritated him, because mortals were supposed to leave their souls intact instead of breaking them and leaving pieces all over the place. Broken souls were so much harder to coax on to the afterlife that he usually just ate them instead. It wasn't really worth the effort to send them to the other side, since anyone who made a Horcrux was basically evil anyway, and they deserved to spend eternity in his stomach. The soul of the last wizard who'd made a Horcrux was still being digested, he thought. He hadn't checked in a while, and it wasn't like he kept an eye on these things. He'd let him move on eventually. Maybe, if he remembered. I have taken the soul of a mortal by the name of Tom Riddle, yes. Many times, Death admitted with a pleased smile. Revenge had been sweet, indeed. Tom's soul had tasted like dark chocolate, and he'd had the pleasure of taking his soul 7 different times. It was rather funny since the soul seemed to remember its numerous previous deaths even if the body didn't. He idly wondered if Lord Voldemort's soul would taste similar in this new dimension. Taken the soul? Other Harry asked, slightly horrified and slightly fascinated, blatantly ignoring Dumbledore's warning glance to be silent. Death turned to Other Harry, Tom forgotten as he refocused on his alternate, mortal shell. What do you mean you took his soul? You mean like a Dementor? Ah, so Dementors existed over here, too? He wondered when he'd get around to going back and making them. He grinned at Other Harry, wide and sharp and more than slightly mad, running his tongue over his teeth in remembrance. It's far more accurate to say that Dementors take souls like me. Death didn't know why these words made the mortals around him so horrified, but it made him laugh nonetheless. Oh, he was going to have such fun here. He could practically taste it. That's the end of this chapter. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe for more and to help this channel grow. See you next time. Bye bye bye.
You got some